Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. I would like to warmly welcome you to the celebration of our third annual Books Are the Basis Week festival. This festival is solely dedicated to encouraging devotees in the daily reading of Srila Prabhupada's books. Today we offer you a presentation by His Holiness Bhakti Caitanya Maharaj on Sri Ishipanishad. I hope you will relish this glorification. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel as we will be releasing new content every day of this festival. Thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada's transcendental books.
Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Vihari
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti-Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha Paditanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna devotees. My name's Bhakti Caitanya Swami, and I'm very happy to be participating in this program. Books are the basis. Srila Prabhupada's books are the basis of our Krishna consciousness. And I'm going to have a look at Sri Ishipanishad. Sri Ishipanishad, very wonderful book. Relatively short, the invocation and 18 mantras, just about, other than nectar of instruction, must be about the shortest book that Srila Prabhupada did on a specific shastra, specific scripture. Yes. So, it's relatively very short, particularly compared to the Bhagavatam with thousands of verses, Bhagavad Gita with exactly 700, and what to speak of Caitanya Charitamrita even more. So, anyway, let's look at Sri Ishipanishad because it's a very important text, and in certain very essential ways, it's a very definitive text. Yeah. So what is, first of all, what is Sri Ishipanishad? Well, we need to go into a little bit of background information here to really get a focus on what is the standing of Ishipanishad, where does it fit in within Prabhupada's books and just within all the Vedic literatures. So the thing is this, Sri Ishipanishad is one of the Upanishads. Yeah, in fact, it is basically the first of the Upanishads. So what are the Upanishads? Well, you know, classically, and Srila Prabhupada would speak in these terms also often, that classically the Vedic literatures are divided into two parts, and they're called Shruti and Smriti. There are different ways of understanding these terms, Shruti and Smriti. But the classical understanding is that Shruti means the four Vedas and its immediate corollaries, those literatures which are just directly connected with the Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Vedas, the four Vedas, directly connected with, and even more than that, you can say they're part of, actually, the four Vedas. And then, so that's Shruti. Then Smriti is particularly the Puranas, the 18 Puranas. There's a collection of Upa-Puranas, secondary Puranas. Then there's the Itihasas. Itihasas means the historical literatures. There are particularly two historical literatures. First of all, Ramayana, story of Lord Ram, and then Mahabharata, story of the Pandavas. And then there's Vedanta Sutra, which basically sums up everything, Shruti and Smriti, actually. There's Dharma-Shastras also, like literatures to do with Ayurveda. There's the Dhanur Veda, that's the science of weaponry, like military science. So there are Dharma-Shastras as well. But in simple terms, but pretty comprehensive terms, these are the two main divisions of what we call the Vedic literatures. And an interesting point, which is not so much understood within our devotee community, is that there's a particular difference between Shruti and Smriti in terms of the Sanskrit used. That the Sanskrit of the Shruti, the four Vedas and their corollaries, that's generally called Vedic Sanskrit. And particularly there are differences in presentation of meter, pronunciation like that. And then the Smriti, the Puranas, etc., the Sanskrit used there is, traditionally at least, it's called a classical Sanskrit, and it differs. There's an element, arguably, of, to some degrees, a little bit of simplicity, but it's more, like I said, in terms of meter and things like this, kind of grammatical considerations, you could say. So the great majority of our literatures, and particularly, of course, we speak of Bhagavad Gita, which is part of Mahabharata, which is Itihasa, and Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the 18th of the Puranas. These are our main literatures. Then there's Caitanya Charitamrita, of course, which is, what would you say, it's like post-Smriti, but it's very much in the Vedic context, being part of the science, a very important part of the science of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But now, so our literatures, they are generally from that Smriti group. except for Ishipanishad. Ishipanishad is the only, what you could say is, strictly speaking, a Shruti literature which Srila Prabhupada presented to us. And he presented it right at the beginning, actually. I remember when I joined the temple in London, January 1973, Ishipanishad, as I recall at least, Ishipanishad was already there. And I definitely remember very clearly in about, it might have been March or April, it was something like that, of 1973, something like that. It was definitely early to mid 73. The first book I ever distributed was Sri Ishipanishad, a hardbound version of Sri Ishipanishad. Yeah, I had distributed Back to Godheads on the streets, but the first actual book that I distributed was Sri Ishipanishad. Yes. And I remember there was a group of us, a party was formed in London for book distribution, and we would go door to door around London. And I remember the first door I knocked on the door opened, some youngish man, 30-ish, opened the door. I put the book in his hand, opened my mouth, and I realized I didn't really know what to say. But Krishna put some words there, and the gentleman, took the book. And I'll never forget that, because that was the first of Srila Prabhupada's books that I distributed. So now let's go a little more deeply into this Shruti and Smriti idea, and what are the Upanishads, and therefore what is Sri Ishipanishad, arguably the first of the Upanishads, certainly one of them. So Srila Prabhupada points out in the purport of Mantra 1, famous Mantra 1, Ishavasyamidam Saravam. I'll go through the mantras shortly, but let's just have a look at this here. In the purport of the first mantra, not the invocation, Om Purnamada Purnamidam, but actually mantra number 1, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Ishipanishad is part of the Yajur Veda. Yes. And as far as I recall, it's not right there, but elsewhere, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Ishipanishad is spoken by the personified Vedas. It's not like Bhagavad Gita where it's Krishna speaking, Arjuna speaking, their names are there, and the same thing in Srimad Bhagavatam, same thing in Caitanya Charitamrita. It's not like those literatures where the names are there. Whoever is speaking, the name is there. Ishipanishad, on the surface of it, it's just these verses, just these, the invocation and 18 verses or mantras. So, but Srila Prabhupada does explain that actually the speaker or speakers of Ishipanishad, that's the personified Vedas. That's important. That's very important, very nice to know. And as an Upanishad, the Ishipanishad has a particular position in Vedic literatures, and here specifically, of course, within the Shruti. Shruti, 4 Vedas, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Vedas. And generally, each of those Vedas is divided into not exactly, verses, but they're called Samitas. Samitas. Of course, we have Brahma Samita from Srila Bhakti-Vedanta, and Srila Prabhupada was asked, where does Brahma Samita fit in to the scheme of the Vedic literatures? And Prabhupada said that it's part of the 4 Vedas. It's a Samita. So these 4 Vedas, the basic divisions are the Samitas. So many Samitas, thousands. Unfortunately, as time has gone on, many of those Samitas have been lost. But now, the Samitas, anyway, the format of the Samitas, the idea behind the Samitas is, generally speaking, they're karma kandya, generally speaking, and they're describing heavenly planets, oftentimes Agni Loka, oftentimes Indra Loka. Agni and Indra are particularly popular deities within the 4 Vedas. And so the Samitas then are describing some things to do with different heavenly planets, often Agni Loka or Indra Loka. Then each Samita traditionally has a Brahmana. Brahmana means another, like a subsidiary literature, or corollary is the term which is used. Corollary, tied into the Samita, is the Brahmana. And the Brahmana basically describes the process of religion, more often than not, generally a process of sacrifice by which one can attain the heavenly situation described in the Samita. Then, after the Brahmana is what is called an Aranyaka, and the Aranyaka gives more detail about the particular process, generally a process of sacrifice. So just more detail about that process of sacrifice to achieve what's described in the Samita. And then you get the Upanishad. Generally, the Vedic literatures are divided like this: Samita with a Brahmana, with an Aranyaka, and then an Upanishad. So the Upanishad generally will give some sort of philosophical perspective on what's described in the first 3 literatures, generally speaking. And with generally, philosophical, but not just simply philosophical, but elevating the discussion to the level of the absolute truth. You know, the heavenly planets and the sacrifices and whatever other activities for achieving them, that's not so much, not very transcendental. It's not transcendental. Therefore, that those 4 Vedas generally, they're considered to be the Karma Kandya section of the Vedas. But then the Upanishad gives a philosophical perspective, generally bringing in the absolute truth in one way or another. And Srila Prabhupada talks about this, that the way the Upanishads describe or address the absolute truth is generally in impersonal terms. Generally in impersonal terms, or if not like just totally impersonal, but any sort of presence of any personality in the absolute truth is not very clear. May be there, but generally not very clear. So this is the structure of the four Vedas, basically, that there's Samitas. Each Samita has its Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. And as I said, a lot of these things have been lost. Really, a lot of these things have been lost due to the influence of time in different ways, which includes, the invasions of India and all that. So Ishipanishad then, it is one of the Upanishads, and it's part of the Yajur Veda. But a thing which distinguishes it from other Upanishads, at least so many of the other Upanishads, is that the Ishipanishad is more personal. It's more personal, particularly the last, how many? 4 verses, 15, 16, 17, 18. They're very personal indeed. And actually, they're very beautiful by any of our scriptural standards in terms of giving descriptions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or at least descriptions in terms of the Supreme Lord being merciful, being kind to the devotees, being kind to those who are really sincerely from the heart trying to approach the Lord. Yes, so the Ishipanishad's like that. And, therefore, because it has its place as traditionally, at least in many circles, accepted as the first of the Upanishads, and because it has, personal leanings, particularly the last 4 verses, as I said, but just in general, personal leanings, which are to a greater degree than at least so many of the Upanishads. So many of the Upanishads. You do get this Gopal Tapani Upanishad, which is even more personal. But Ishipanishad, I'm not aware of Srila Prabhupada actually speaking about why he chose from the Upanishads the Ishipanishad. I'm not aware of him saying anything specifically in these terms, why he chose it. But at least to my mind, it seems like that. First of all, it's generally accepted as the first of the Upanishads. That's there. And then this leaning and even at the end, quite very, very personal nature to it. So that's, all these things are significant. They really are significant. And I've just always found it very interesting, particularly after I read, I really studied Tattva Sandarbha of Srila Jiva Goswami and the way he discusses about the different levels of the literatures which make up the Vedic literatures. It really struck me that there's considerable significance to the fact that Srila Prabhupada chose Sri Ishipanishad as the only Shruti Vedic literature that he translated and commented on. It's significant. It's definitely significant. So, okay, devotees, there's a little background and just a little bit, I'll say a little bit more as we go too, but a little bit about my own impressions and realizations and appreciation for Sri Ishipanishad. Yeah, I really appreciate Sri Ishipanishad. So now let's just have a look at the structure and just get a picture, step by step, of how the Isopanishad develops itself, or how the personified Vedas develop their thoughts through the course of the Isopanishad. So I've taught overview courses on Isopanishad on numerous occasions for Bhakti-Šasтры. Yeah, it's a standard part, one of the four literatures which we study for Bhakti-Šasтры: Isopanishad, Nectar of Instruction, Nectar of Devotion, and Bhagavad Gita. So when we do these overviews, then we look at the structure of the particular book. Structure means that at a certain point, or say in the beginning, the subject matter is introduced for some number of verses, and then when that's done, then the subject matter is explored in this way, and then after some number of verses, there's a bit of a change of perspective in the discussion, in the description, and verses are grouped like that. It's very clear to see. Like in Bhagavad Gita, it's the same idea. It's just the same idea that first of all, at some point, Arjuna's talking, and then Krishna responds. And then Arjuna speaks, and Krishna responds. And that's Bhagavad Gita, you could say, in terms of structure. That Arjuna, of course, we all know so well, at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's got many objections, and he just doesn't want to fight at all. But then Lord Krishna starts responding to his objections. And then Arjuna comes back again with some more points, and Krishna addresses those points. And that's Bhagavad Gita, basically. At least, in a certain sense, that's how Bhagavad Gita is structured. So Isopanishad also, it has a structure. And there's some flexibility in how you might combine some verses together and separate them from others. But the way I've done it, at least, when I've taught Isopanishad, first time, gosh, I forget when it was, but it was, I think, in the 90s, is as follows. This is my perspective, or these are my ideas about the structure. the dividing up the different verses or mantras in Sri Ishipanishad. So I say in simple terms, and it's flexible, but in simple terms, I say there are 5 sections in Sri Ishipanishad. First section is the invocation, Om Purnamada Purnamidam. I'll read all the verses shortly, but there's the invocation, then there's mantra 1, Ishavasyamidam Sarvam, and then there's mantra 2. And mantra 2 it's very directly a comment on the invocation in mantra 1. It's directly a comment. And it's a really wonderful comment, actually. So I've put those 3 verses together as section 1, the invocation, mantra 1, mantra 2. Then mantra 3 is like a negative response to that, a negative response to the invocation in mantras 1 and 2. Yeah, it's a negative response. So I put that on its own, mantra 3. Then section 3, mantras 4 to 8, which are essentially, you could say, celebrating the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like other Upanishads, sometimes the Isopanishad is not just completely outright personal, but if you study these mantras 4 to 8, you'll see that it's talking about the absolute truth, but in terms which they must be personal. Yeah, must be personal, ascribing personal characteristics to the absolute truth, which, of course, the impersonalists, they are, I don't want to use the word expert, but they are certainly determined to interpret even the most, just clearly personal statements, even of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. But even in the case of the Bhagavatam, we know that Shankaracharya, we understand out of respect, didn't translate and comment on the Bhagavatam, but some of his followers later did. And they have managed to twist some of all of the just very clearly personal statements that the absolute truth is a person and is the supreme person and is Krishna. But they have managed to twist them into something impersonal. So, yeah, you could say expert, but it's more like determined. They just, at any cost, even at the cost of good sense, just, not making good sense, but they're insisting on presenting things, even from the Bhagavatam, as being impersonal statements. So the section 3 from mantra 4 to mantra 8 is actually, there's the term Purusha appears there. It appears there, which means person. And in this context, supreme person. It's mentioned, as I recall, Purusha, the word Purusha is mentioned once in those verses. But it's clear just from the context that the particular qualities being mentioned, they're qualities of a person. Yeah. They can't be qualities of things or of nothing. Right. And then there's, I say the fourth section is mantra 9 to mantra 14. And, arguably that can be divided into two sections. The first three verses, 9, 10, and 11, are dealing with knowledge. And then 12, 13, and 14 are dealing with personalities, actually. With personalities, controllers and controlled, like that. I've put them together. So we'll have a look at those verses too in due course. And then finally, the fifth section is very clear. It's just very, very clear. Mantras 15, 16, 17, 18, those four mantras, they go together. And they're very personal. They're really very personal, because the speaker or the personified Vedas, they're appealing to the absolute truth, to the supreme person, that please show us your face and remove your dazzling effulgence. Yeah. Time of death is coming. My time of death is coming, and please don't forget me. Please remember what I've done. And please accept me. And this is all very personal. It's all very, very personal indeed. And it's really beautiful. And it's really in keeping with moods which we find, like in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, without naming the person, the supreme person. But it's really very, very nice. So, okay, there you go, devotees. That's the structure of Ishipanishad. Let's just read the verses here, and then I think you'll get the idea what I'm getting at. And let's hope it helps you when you read the Ishipanishad the next time, because you should. It's very important literature. Okay, so let's go through the first section, Invocation, Mantra 1 and Mantra 2. So the Invocation, very, very famous verse, and just amongst the followers of Sanatan Dharma, or just the followers of Hinduism, this verse, you'll find it being chanted at different types of functions and programs that these people put on. So, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete, and because he's completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever's produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. And one of the devotees who are presenting Ishipanishad as part of Bhakti-Shastra before I did a very interesting study of this verse, this invocation, and its purport. The first thing is that this term complete, personality of God is perfect and complete, and he's completely perfect, etc., etc., The term complete in the actual verse appears in one way or another 8 times in one verse. I think that's very significant. Yeah, very significant. And in the purport, the term complete, in one way or another, like sometimes it appears as completely, but it's still, completeness is there. In the purport, if I remember correctly, it appears 35 times. That's really a lot. And you must get the idea that Prabhupada's really, really, really stressing this point about if you connect up with Krishna properly, completely, then your life becomes completely complete, completely complete, completely perfect. Yeah. And that's, that's in a nutshell. That's Krishna consciousness, you could say. Now, of course, we're not here to go in depth into any of the verses. That's, you need a whole seminar to do that. But this is the sort of foundational point of Sri Ishipanishad, more or less, the completeness of the absolute truth and life when you're connected with the absolute truth, completely connected. Okay, then mantra 1, Ishavasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena chaktena bunjita magrada kasyasviddanam. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. This is like a Krishna conscious perspective on socialism, communism, even in relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada, when he visited Russia, or when he was getting ready to, and then when he was in Russia, he really, it was 1971, Russia was fully communist, as much as it was humanly possible to be fully communist. And he, with the Professor Kotovsky, he was emphasizing to him that Krishna consciousness is communistic, so to speak. And he wanted to meet with intellectuals, friends of Kotovsky, his colleagues, and make this point to them, that don't think that Vedic culture is anti-communist. It's not. So anyway, this is another very, very important and very famous verse, actually. Everyone's got their quota. As soon as you infringe on someone else's quota, you create an imbalance. And as soon as there's imbalance, things are out of whack, disturbance arises. Yeah. So Prabhupada talks about quotas like for animals like tigers, eating meat is their quota, but it's not for humans. Then mantra 2 is also part of section 1, I say, and let me just read it. Kuravan eveha karamani jijivashech chitam sama evam twai nanyatetoste nakarma lipyate nare. One may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on working in that way, for that sort of work will not bind him to the law of karma. There is no alternative to this way for man. So the whole idea is the complete arrangement of the personality of Godhead, and the idea of everyone having a quota assigned by the Supreme, by the Absolute Truth or the Supreme Lord. In other words, life in Krishna consciousness. That's what it is. That's clearly what it is. And you can just go on indefinitely living within this world. If you live like that, if you work like that. And, that reminds us, of course, of Narottam Das Thakur saying that my only desire is to live with the devotees and serve their lotus feet, birth after birth. Mama Janmani Janmanishvare, Lord Caitanya said, Bhavatad Bhaktira Haitiki Twayi. Lord Caitanya said, I don't need anything material, a beautiful woman, money, etc., etc. All I want is your pure devotional service, birth after birth. So, yes, Lord Chaitanya says that. Narottam Das Thakur says that. So, this is the same thing. In essence, it's just the same thing. So that's the first section. And then the second section is mantra 3, which talks about what it's going to be like if you don't do that. Asurya namate loka, andena tamasavrita, tamste pretya abhigachanti, yeke chatma hanojana. The killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the worlds of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. Well, I don't think we should take this as meaning something other than not doing what has been presented so far in the invocation and mantra 1 and mantra 2. It's pretty obvious that it's saying that if you don't do this, then you fall down. And life really, really becomes very bad, completely bad. Yeah. So then the next section, mantra 4 to mantra 8, third section, Anejarekam manasojaviyo nainadeva apnavan purvam arshat tadavato nyan atyeti tishtat tasminapo matarishvadadati. Although fixed in his abode, the personality of Godhead is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. The powerful demigods cannot approach him. Although in one place he controls those who supply the air and rain, despite that, he surpasses all in excellence. So, this section is emphasizing, as we said, the absolute truth in very personal ways, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah, swifter than the mind and faster than others. This is all personal. This is not like just plainly impersonal. And controlling things. This is personal. Okay, yeah, so it's 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 5. Tadejati tanajati tadure tadvantike tadantarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasyasya bharyata. Supreme Lord walks and doesn't walk. He's far away, but he's very near as well. He's within everything, and yet he's outside of everything. Yeah, that's the absolute truth, or the Supreme Lord. And, to some degree, it's understandable how people could say this is referring to something impersonal. But the thing is, the first line of the Sanskrit, tad ajati, tad naijati, is referring to walking. Walking. Yeah. And walking is not done by things. Walking is done by living entities, and particularly living entities with, the extreme qualifications being discussed here. That means Supreme Person, ultimately. And then mantra 6, Yastu sarvani bhutani atman yevan upashyati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsate. One who sees systematically everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, who sees all living entities as his parts and parcels, and who sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any being. And this verse also is talking in personal terms because it talks of bhutas, sarvani bhutani, sarva bhuteshu. Yeah. Evanu pashyati. So, sarva bhutani, all living beings. Sarva bhuteshu, also, all living beings. Pashyati, seeing. Seeing is not done by things, but by people. So this is all glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, glorifying the Absolute Truth. And mantra 7, Yasmin sarvani bhutani atma vabud vijanata tatriko mohat kashoka ekatva manu pashyata. And again, same sort of idea. One who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks, as Atma, in quality one with the Lord, becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? Again, sarvani bhutani, the living entities who vijanata, who know things. Yes, and they are connected with the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Lord. And mantra 8, Saparyagach chukra makayam avranam, ashnaviram shudam apapa vidam, kavirmanishi paribu swayambur, yata tachyatoratan vyadadach chasvatibhya samabhya. Little trickier Sanskrit. Such a person must factually know the greatest of all, the personality of Godhead, who is unembodied, omniscient, beyond reproach, without veins, pure and uncontaminated, the self-sufficient philosopher, who has been fulfilling everyone's desire since time immemorial. And again, it's very hard to consider this as being just totally impersonal. Of course, being unembodied, beyond reproach, certain of these things you can say, they're not necessarily specifically personal, but sama. Yes, sama. Talking about people who know these things and who know this person who has been fulfilling everyone's desires since time immemorial. And fulfilling desires is a personal activity. It must be. Then the fourth section, mantra 9 to 14, arguably can be divided in two sections. One dealing with knowledge, one dealing with the persons who are involved in all these things. Right, so let me just read the translations. So mantra 9 to 14, 9. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. 10. The wise, those who have vidya, the Sanskrit term used is vidya or avidya, knowledge or ignorance. So those who have vidya, the wise, have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. And 11, only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Okay. So that's in regards to knowledge. Now, in regards to worship, because the term upasate is used. Upasate means to worship. Like the upasana kanda of the Vedas is that part of the Vedas dealing with worship of different deities. Right, so 12, is it 12? Yeah, 12. Those who are engaged in the worship of demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so do the worshippers of the impersonal absolute. 13. It is said that one result is obtained by worshipping the supreme cause of all causes, and that another result is obtained by worshipping what is not supreme. All this is heard from the undisturbed authorities who clearly explained it. Yes, these undisturbed authorities who are obviously people. And verse 14, one should know perfectly the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna and his transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes, as well as the temporary material creation with its temporary demigods, men and animals. When one knows these, he surpasses death and the ephemeral cosmic manifestation with it. And in the eternal kingdom of God, he enjoys his eternal life of bliss and knowledge. So I put these two sets of 3 verses each together because they can be separated too, but there's natural connection, and particularly in the last verse of each of the 3, both of which, just like we read right now, mantra 14, say we have to understand both the Lord and this material world. We have to understand both nicely. Then finally, the last 4 verses, which are just really wonderful. 15. O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. And we can note that the word mukham is used here. Mukha, your face. Yeah, your face, the face of the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord. 16. O my Lord, O primeval philosopher, maintainer of the universe, O regulating principle, destination of the pure devotees, well-wisher of the progenitors of mankind, please remove the effulgence of your transcendental rays so that I can see your form of bliss. You are the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead, like unto the sun, as am I. And I did mention that in one of these verses here in Isopanishad, the word Purusha is used in relation to the absolute truth, who this person or these people want to see, the face, the mukha, the face of. And this is it. The last line of the Sanskrit of Mantra 16, Tate pashyami yosava so purusha soham as me. So the absolute truth is being described as Purusha. Okay, and Mantra 17, let this temporary body be burnt to ashes, and let the air of life be merged with the totality of life. Now, O my Lord, please remember all my sacrifices, and because you're the ultimate beneficiary, please remember all that I've done for you. Krito smara, kritam smara. Please remember everything that I've done for you. And the last verse, O my Lord, as powerful as fire, O omnipotent one, now I offer you all obeisances falling on the ground at your feet. O my Lord, please lead me on the right path to reach you. And since you know all that I've done in the past, please free me from the reactions to my past sins, so that there'll be no hindrance to my progress. So it's all very personal, very beautiful, really, really wanting to see the face of the Lord and to know him as Purusha, as a person, as the supreme person, and to get his mercy and go back to Godhead. So there you go, devotees, some thoughts on Sri Ishipanishad. Sri Ishipanishad ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.